Throughout the decades, there have been many different superstars who have left their long-lasting imprints on the league. With that being said, not every superstar player was so fortunate. Some players had their careers cut short before their legacy could truly get started. Today, I'm breaking down the top 10 ruined potentials of NBA history. According to me, of course. Let me make this clear. I'm not ranking this list based on how good the players were at the time their careers were cut short, but rather, I'm ranking these players based on how high I believe their potential was, compared to where their potential ended. So let's get into it. Starting off at number 10, Yao Ming. This graceful 7'6" star looked as if he was poised to have a career that put him among the greatest centers in NBA history. Not only did he have the backing of an entire major country, but Yao was far more skilled and talented than his size would suggest, as he had an incredibly soft touch and an elite mid-range game. He helped lead his Houston Rockets to the playoffs in 2 out of his first 3 seasons in the league, and was an all-star in each of those seasons. Unfortunately, it was in his 4th year in the league that he experienced his first major injury. From that point on, Yao's appearances on the court would be extremely inconsistent, as the health of his feet and knees completely betrayed him. His productivity on the court would continuously decline, and by the time he had reached his 31st birthday, he had played his final game in the NBA. Number 9. Tracy McGrady. Based on the talent he displayed during his time in the league, you would think that T-Mac would be higher on my list. The thing is, he actually had a longer and healthier career than many players on this list. Considering how McGrady had already completed 8 seasons in the league before the injuries became a severe problem. With that being said, he was only 26 years old when the chronic back issues started to kick in, so there was still plenty of room for him to improve, and he's definitely worthy of being on this list. Before the injury started, T-Mac had been a scoring champion in back-to-back seasons. He had been an all-star in 5 straight seasons, and he was even being compared frequently to Kobe Bryant for the title of the best player in the NBA. It's hard to know what they could have achieved if he hadn't had his career derailed with injuries. But considering how his Rockets pushed the world champion Lakers to 7 games in the 2009 playoffs, at least one championship for McGrady certainly isn't hard to envision. Number 8. David Thompson. He was the man known as Skywalker thanks to his remarkable athleticism, as he's constantly referred to as one of the greatest leapers of basketball history. To put it simply, this 6'4" shooting guard was one of the greatest scorers of all time, and in his first 4 years as a pro, he averaged about 26 points per game on a remarkable 51.4% shooting. One of the more special performances was when he scored 73 points against the Detroit Pistons, which included 53 points in the first half alone. David Thompson was one of the most skilled and athletic wings of basketball history, and even the great Michael Jordan drew much inspiration in his game from David Thompson, which is why he had Thompson present him into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, there was a lot of legacy-building basketball left on the table for Thompson. Leading up to his first major injury, Thompson had been the Rookie of the Year, he had been an All-Star in his first 4 seasons, and he had even won the All-Star Game MVP twice. Shortly after his injury at the age of 25, it came to light that Thompson had a severe drug addiction, which only expedited the process of him exiting the NBA. Before he reached the age of 30, he had played his final game in the league. Number 7. Brandon Roy. When he was at his best, Kobe Bryant referred to this 6'6" shooting guard as the most difficult player to guard in all of the Western Conference. He was one of the most clutch and gifted athletes in the game, as he was lethal from the perimeter and was a tremendous finisher around the rim. In his first 3 years in the league, he was the Rookie of the Year, he made multiple All-Star teams, and had established himself as one of the best closers in basketball. The thing is, we never got to see a truly healthy season from Brandon Roy, as the beginning of his injuries go all the way back to his rookie season. By his 4th year in the league, he had to undergo surgery on his knee, and before you know it, his career was in freefall, and he was out of the NBA by the age of 28. Number 6. Penny Hardaway. During an interview in the mid-90s, Michael Jordan said that Penny Hardaway was one of the players who would carry on the torch after he retired. Penny was a large 6'7" point guard who had playmaking ability that was reminiscent of Magic Johnson, but he was also a perimeter shooter who was always a threat from deep. He was an electrifying all-star and a consistent triple-double threat. Defensively, he was also one of the best pickpockets in the entire league. After missing only 5 games in his first 3 seasons, he had to undergo knee surgery, which ended up affecting much of his explosiveness. From that point on, it was all downhill from there. Sure, he went on to have a long career, retiring from the game of basketball at the age of 36, but he was quickly reduced to that of a journeyman and a role player, never reliving the glory days of his first few seasons in the league. Number 5. Maurice Stokes. Stokes was a strong 6'7" power forward who was very ahead of his time, with his incredibly strong build and his tremendous athleticism. Maurice was an all-star and an all-NBA player in each of his first 3 seasons in the league. He was also one of the greatest rebounders of all time, as he led the league in rebounds in his rookie season with a whopping 16.3 per game. Similarly to Bill Russell, he wasn't the most skilled scorer, but he was an absolute force defensively and on the boards. He also had tremendous court vision for a power forward, as he was always among the league leaders in assists per game. He was a gifted young player who had the basketball world at his fingertips. Unfortunately, in his first ever playoff game in 1958, Stokes had one of the worst accidents in all of basketball, as he leaped over the top of the defender and landed on his head, which ended up paralyzing him for life. Jack Twyman, who was an NBA Hall of Famer and a former teammate of Stokes, said that if this accident never happened, he believed that the duo of Oscar Robertson and Maurice Stokes would have made the Cincinnati Royals the dynasty of the 1960s, instead of the Boston Celtics. Number 4. Grant Hill. Many NBA legends have referred to Grant Hill as the LeBron James before LeBron James, in the sense that he was a strong, quick, athletically gifted forward who could handle the ball like a dynamic guard. He was also a consistent triple-double threat, and after his first 6 seasons in the league, he had amassed these totals in points, assists, and rebounds. In the history of the NBA, only Oscar Robertson, Larry Bird, and LeBron James had eclipsed these numbers in their first 6 seasons in the league. Unfortunately for Hill, it was at the end of that 6th season, at the age of 26, where he severely sprained his ankle, which is the injury that would haunt him throughout his career. In later years, he did manage to reinvent himself as a solid contributing role player, with only a fraction of the explosiveness. But regardless, his talent and potential remains as one of the greatest what-ifs of NBA history. Number 3. Bill Walton. Bill is an interesting case because although he already built a championship Hall of Fame legacy in his short career, it still could have been so much more. In the history of the league, I don't believe there's ever been a more injury-prone player than Bill Walton, as the man was constantly fracturing bones all over his body. His injury history is enough to make even Anthony Davis blush, as he was always getting surgery for his broken legs and feet, starting as early as high school. Despite having a body made of glass, Walton was one of the most impressive centers on the court. In his first 4 seasons in the league, he was a rebounding champion, he was a blocks champion, he made 2 all-defense teams, he was a league MVP, he was an NBA champion, and he was the finals MVP. He was an elite passer for a big man, and he was one of the all-time great rebounders and rim protectors. Although he dragged his career out until his mid-30s, he was never able to play a prime season without injuries. One can only imagine the kind of resume this man would have built if he was never cursed with arguably the most frail body that the game has ever seen. Number 2. Derrick Rose. At the time tragedy struck, Derrick Rose was younger than most of the players on this list. When he was with the Chicago Bulls, the 6'3" point guard was one of the most explosive players that the game had ever seen. His elite combination of speed, quickness, and leaping ability made him an absolute menace in fast break situations, and around the rim, he established himself as one of the all-time great finishers. After a monstrous season where he led the Bulls to a 62-20 record in 2011, he was rewarded with a league MVP at the age of 22, which made him the youngest MVP winner in the history of the NBA. Usually, superstar players win their first MVP award when they're around 8 to 10 years older, yet Rose was already in the mix of the best players in the league, despite being one of the youngest players in the game. At this point, his potential seemed off the charts, as the Bulls appeared as if they were on their way to being perennial contenders. But in the first game of the 2012 playoff season, Derrick Rose tore his ACL, which forever hindered the explosiveness that he once had in his youth. Despite returning to the court, Rose would never be an MVP candidate again, and he never even returned to an NBA All-Star game for that matter. Number 1. Len Bias. One of the greatest athletic potentials that the game has ever seen also turns out to be one of the most tragic stories of sports history. Len Bias was a 6' 8" forward out of the University of Maryland, who had a deep bag of skills. He was an athletic and strong force, and he had a smooth mid-range jumper, and was a tremendous rebounder. For a player who was only in his early 20s, Bias appeared as if he had already grown into his fully matured man body, which only led people to further imagine what kind of athlete he would be in his eventual prime. Bias wasn't just merely a great basketball player, but he was good enough to go toe-to-toe with Michael Jordan, as the two players regularly had epic battles in college. Not only did the stars appear to be great adversaries, but they looked as if they would one day have a great rivalry in the NBA. Thanks to a major trade several years earlier, the defending champion Boston Celtics had the second overall pick in the 1986 NBA draft, and they used the pick to take the highly anticipated Len Bias, setting him up to learn under the wing of Larry Bird, while immediately competing for championships. Tragically, just hours after being drafted by the Celtics, Len Bias passed away due to drug use that caused him to have a fatal seizure. Again, there's no guarantee that he would have developed into a star at all, but based on his talent in college, based on his level of competition, and based on the situation he was heading into, I'm very comfortable putting him in the number 1 spot on my list. So what do you guys think? Who was too high and who was too low? Let me know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching as always. Make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.